you?
Hi, how are you?
Were we starting chapter 5 or did we get into it a little bit? I forget.
We're starting at this meeting. I think we had just finished chapter 4.
Anything before we start going through the book? I know we met yesterday, so.
Yeah, I don't have any updates.
So, look at what we did last time. Last time we covered all this stuff. Oh. There's a lot on my mind brewing about the paper, about the analogies paper. We'll cover that when we get there, I guess, but nothing major to say right now. Whoops. Go. So, that's crazy. Interpretant has been on my mind a lot. I saw Johan post something about kind of like interpretants at different scales of an organism. So more about that later. I haven't really read it, so I can't say that much.
Is it different scales?
Yeah, like.
What that means, yeah, because of what we read yesterday.
It's let me see. I can quickly see it on the thing here. How can I most easily share this? I'll put this, do it this way. Here we go. Because there's a paper that he got to either preview or look at or like be a part of somehow. Let me put in the group. Nope, that's not it. Hang on. All right. So, doesn't seem to be here yet. Well, I guess it's loading.
Go to threads.
What's that?
Go to threads up at the top. You have a new.
It's just loading on mine.
Oh.
I had the pleasure of getting a preview of this paper, a very interesting topic that links phenomena across several different scales, ranging from cellular basis of stress responses to political economy. He links the article, and it's something like, if the ostensible reasons for losing weight are benefits to health, then the pursuit of leanness for its own sake by means cannot promote health. Can be considered a psychological version of Goodhart's law. So I guess it's about Goodhart's law and about what things transfer across different scales and some other stuff. But let me try this. I don't know. I guess we can just move on because for whatever reason it's not going to my Slack and it's just kind of an empty thing right now. So I guess as far as this goes, I see Amanda put some stuff here. I don't know if you want to lead with this or just go through the stuff. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with the Johan thing, so let's move on, I guess.
Let's just start going through it like from the beginning because it is fairly short.
Yeah. I So fantasy, I didn't, is this like a technical term or like like something that meant a specific thing? I was really confused what fantasy meant.
So when I read that, I thought of so Whitehead, the philosopher. I read a book about his philosophy, and they describe Whitehead's idea of doing philosophy as kind of like you have to take off on the airplane and explore and use your imagination and then land. And when you land, you might come up with something, you might like make progress, but there's an element of imagination. And I read fantasy here as imagination, as like getting a little loose, using this metaphor, but with the intent of like gathering what you can and then coming back down to earth. So yeah, I read fantasy as just like a interesting use of a metaphor that is interesting to in terms of like the consequences. Like to say that the organism is like a pattern and the environment that's full of chaos is like noise. There's something that we can actually gain from that.
So similarly, or like it's kind of related, I think it's interesting to note that I think all the chapters were changed. So originally this one was called, chapter 5 was history of language and then individual as the word. And I kind of feel like he kind of combined these somehow. And I haven't read this, but I guess I should say I put in the Slack the original, what I think is the original first version of the book.
Oh yeah, I took a look and it looks like the chapter we're on now is the organism as the word.
Yeah.
Individual as the word. And then the history of language must have been just like, he must have just condensed that into the previous chapter.
Yeah. And I'm curious how other changes were there. But I think that makes sense for fantasy. And you know, the cave analogy, and then he kind of gets into his central thesis, which, you know, very cybernetic homeostasis, and just all the stuff that's going on. You know, we have these bounds to live in, we have to be certain here, mechanical automata, perhaps as opposed to cellular automata, but mechanisms and homeostasis and feedback and so on. He goes through here. Yeah, organism is the message. I forget where that is in here, but that's kind of his central thing. And he says, we are not the stuff that abides, but the patterns that perpetuate themselves. We are but whirlpools in a river of ever-flowing water. I would like his enclaves of meaning quote too. I don't think that's in this chapter. And he kind of gets into this bit about Kipling and his sort of, I don't know, this with the night mail universe he created in the story. And it was about like air travel sort of like amplifies, he didn't say this, like air travel like makes democratic peace theory to the maximum and everybody's cool and we all have like this sort of utopia, I guess. War was obsolete and the world's really important heirs were all part of this aerial board of control who's, you know, I don't know what, I don't know if this is sort of a cybernetic supercontroller reference in sort of like Project Cyber Science sense, or, you know, some benevolent machine has taken all these responsibilities over. but it has the rather fastest picture which Kipling gives us, and this understandable view of his he gives on his background about Britain and India, and to see and to give commands to the world as a whole is almost the same as being everywhere. I don't know how much you want to get into this stuff, or if you want to, I don't know, anything you want to say about this section, or kind of move on to other stuff. I like the ultra facts. I don't know if that was a real thing or not, but it sounds pretty cool. Like
The fax machine? Yeah, I thought that was funny. The fax machine as an example of like extended cognition.
it's always interesting because it's sort of like he has like the telephone and the typewriter, and now there's all those conceptions of where things were and where they are now. But I think this is interesting about, he kind of breaks it down a bit more into material transport and the transport of information, and how I don't think he gets into it, but it kind of gets into the teleporter question of like Star Trek, and like why can't we just reassemble people's molecules in another space?
Yeah, I thought the discussion of twins was interesting. Like, could there be is there some similarity between twinning and like split personalities? And then, so those are both cases of like fission, like a splitting, but then could there be a case of fusion where he talks about if two machines can become coupled? I thought this was a cool discussion. I like the personal identity question in philosophy. It was like my favorite thing to teach in Intro to Philosophy. So I appreciated this discussion of it where it talked about like information and organization.
Well, and I think that's something, it's interesting to hear that from you, because I think I'm kind of labeling an entire arena that I'm trying to sort something out in as like person studies. I know personhood in and of itself is this thing. Like, I'm not necessarily beholden to that term, but I feel like there's a specific arena in which, whether it's like spirituality or philosophy or modern psychology and cognitive science and all this stuff, like there's an arena that I want to demarcate, and I don't know if it's quite natural. Like in the old times, kind of everything was like a branch of philosophy, like natural philosophy, and I don't know what the quite like ancient Greek term for person studies would be, and I frankly don't think there needs to be a antecedent. Like I don't think there's a word that accurately describes what I want it to be, because I think it's a different lens I'm trying to make out. But I don't know what philosophy has in that store. But I feel like there's something in that space that I'm working around. So I want to say more about this. I think this part on the left is just, he's talking about Christianity and Buddhism, and then Leibniz's monads, which are quite, I never knew about that necessarily, but I think it's interesting to his view of sort of the world, and also to an extent, I think that's an important insight into his kind of internal landscape, I guess. Eventually we get to what is this here? Okay, he gets down into the actual biology of mammalian stuff. Cool. Yeah. Okay. Is this all right? The twinning thing isn't here yet. The twinning starts here. What was he kind of saying there? He's talking about. Okay. Let's just go here. Double monster, which is, I've never seen that term before.
No, me neither. That made me laugh.
Is that is he basically saying like twins connected at the brain? Or
I think that is just like conjoined twins in general, because then he says there's either this joined there's either a joined central nervous system or there's not.
This is actually all I need to know is this image, because I know. There we go. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Oh, I remember this guy. I thought he was. Maybe I'm thinking of someone else, but. Let me get to your stuff here.
Yeah, I think that so the physical identity of an individual does not consist in the matter of which it is made. That was very important. It is instead, whatever, I don't remember what page it was, the bit that I highlighted and put in Notion. But instead, the individuality it's like a flame rather than a stone. It's in form rather than in substance.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that made a lot of sense, and I think maybe at the time that was more radical of a view. Although now that seems more obvious just because of our like improving scientific knowledge. And the thing that he cites about metabolism and, through growth and development, there's like no material that stays with the body. It's like the ship of Theseus. And that's like actually how we work.
Yeah, he makes the reference to like butterflies again or something like that somewhere as well. Yeah. He goes back to cell stuff. He goes back to the traveling by telegraph. I do think. This here. I think there's some into that, and I think in a sense of I think it's interesting in the sense of I think an insight Norbert has and is maybe trying to say but doesn't have the words for is kind of getting at, and I think it would be somewhat radical or like hard. It's hard to totally bridge like sort of what were people saying in the 1930s and 40s as this book is being written and what Norbert grew up with versus his suggestion about people being of the potentiality, I guess. And I think there's it kind of relates to what I said about like I keep wanting to go back to that discussion. I think it was in Saturday Morning Neurosyn like 3 or 4 or 5 weeks ago where I was talking about the modern day Norbert Weiner and what he would say in the context of he seemed to be explaining, a lot of this book now is kind of not, like not impressive, I guess. But I think he was trying to convey this sort of glimpse of technology is going to afford these different ways of being, and kind of the line between different ways of being, but also I think he's trying to get at that technology may be affording it's sort of the line between is technology transforming people versus is technology creating spaces and means by which a person's can be like expressed more fully, something along those nature. And I don't think that's his. I don't think he's explicitly saying that. Maybe he does say that eventually, but I feel like he's kind of. I feel like he's sort of riding this line between trying to be somewhat technically sound and also dealing with the quote unquote fantasy of exploring this space somewhat.
Yeah, because I think he wants a lot of this to apply to machines too. So he's like still talking very abstractly, where you can talk about a machine's homeostasis and a machine embodying a pattern that constitutes its identity. There's nothing special here about it being a living system. That is what he's talking about, but my impression just from the previous chapters and because of how kind of loosely he's talking here, that a machine would also fall into this category of like message among noise. So maybe the right kind of machine. It would have to have these kind of like self-maintenance activities, maybe. Because he says, like in his little sci-fi thought experiment, he concludes that the thing preventing this like recreation of an organism elsewhere, it's just a technical difficulty. Like in theory, we could have all the information we need from the organization of the matter, and it's because in order to like gain all that information, you'd have to alter the tissue or something. Like that's what's stopping us. But like teleportation would be possible if we had the right technology.
In other words, the fact that we cannot telegraph the pattern of a man from one place to another seems to be due to technical difficulties. Yeah. And in particular, such difficulty of keeping an organism in being during such a radical reconstruction. This idea is plausible. For the problem of the radical reconstruction of living organism, it would be hard to find anything such more radical than the butterfly pupa. And I think Bradley sort of commented on this before in terms of like what, I don't know, like there's a discussion about this and how like how much is it or is it not actually the same, is that the same memories, the same stuff going on? I don't remember about that too much, but
yeah, doesn't Weiner use the butterfly metamorphosis as an example of like a discontinuity in memory or something in a previous chapter? When he's that bit that was like very much embodied memory, like memory as a process, like that's the general theme I remember. I thought he uses the butterfly example as an illustration of like a physical process where there could not be a continuity of memory. So it's interesting that he then cites that here as like, oh yeah, this deconstruction and reconstruction is possible because look at this thing in nature. Whereas previously he had interpreted that as like not really a continuity of like one, like it's one organism, but I'd have to go back to see exactly what he said. So he was talking about memory, and that's where there's supposed to be this discontinuity.
Right. Yeah. and this whole chapter, which I think kind of gets at here, is he stated this not to because he's really concerned about telegraphing or transporting in the Star Trek sense, but because it may help us understand the fundamental idea of communications is that of transmission of messages, and that the bodily transmission of matter and messages is only one conceivable way of attaining that end. It will be well to reconsider Kipling's test of the importance of traffic in the modern world from the point of view of traffic, which is overwhelmingly not so much the transmission of human bodies as the transmission of human information. What do I think about this? I don't know. I don't really know what to say. Let's look at this quote. So this quote from the past is about the conditions for learning and memory seems to be a certain continuity of organization, which allows the alterations to be reduced by outer sense impressions to be retained as more or less permanent changes of structure or function. Metamorphosis is too radical to lead to much lasting record of these changes.
So there's a place where memory and like the experience of continuity could come apart from actual continuity of the organism, if we grant what he says here. But I remember when we were talking about this metamorphosis example, this might be where like science might tell us otherwise. I don't know the details. It's probably something about a morphic resonance or something. Maybe there's a story to tell about how the butterfly retains the memories or whatever of its previous stage. But
I knew you said previous, but in my mind I heard retains the memories of its creepiest stage. It relates to my own transformation. So I feel like, and we can dip into the next one here, but I feel like this is kind of the key. The key thing is sort of this moving through mediums, physically, informationally, what I think, I don't know. I feel like what I'm taking away from this chapter, kind of like what's the point of Norbert's work here, is kind of about like moving something. Chapter 5 is what is like the organism as a message or something like that. I don't remember what it is. I know it is in this one. It's the individual as a word, and he's like the organism as a message or something here. Organization as the message. And I feel like, you know, we know later on there was like the medium is the message, the medium is the massage, and how there's sort of this, you know, it feels like this is kind of just a big commentary on trying to, you know, talking about the different dynamics of it in any kind of a quote unquote fantastical way. I don't know. Any other thoughts about this chapter or the trafficking or the interpretant kind of things?
I enjoyed the chapter. Like I said, I liked the personal identity stuff. It was interesting to see a version of that from, 1950 using cybernetics language. It was when I taught that subject, like there's a bunch of different iterations of like teleporter thought experiments.
And when you taught it too? Was that?
Yeah, like the philosophical issue of like personal identity is often taught like with a series of thought experiments. Like, oh, if I'm trying to remember exactly how some of them go, but they're basically like they usually involve some kind of fission, some kind of splitting. So it's like if there's a device that scans all of your matter and gets all the information that it needs to like recreate you, it doesn't destroy you in the process, but it gets all the information it needs and then it reconstructs you elsewhere. So kind of like this, except the original is still there. Like you're still, your experience is of going into a scanner and, you know, getting scanned and then walking out of the scanner. But then elsewhere, a different scanner recreates you based on this pattern. So now there's two of you. And the question is like, which one's you? Is the second person also you? Or do you somehow die when you go in the scanner? So you can like frame the thought experiment in different ways in order to try to get different like intuitions out. Parfit has a few versions of this. Eric Parfit does. What is this?
Is this the one I'm looking for? I was trying to find a good example. I've recently played parts of Cyberpunk 2077, which is actually a lot more interesting. Like it's a lot more fun philosophical reference point than I understood. I don't play many video games, but I wanted to do something that was just totally separate, basically. It's based. This is where you. I don't know if this is going to be good or not, but there's like a boxing side quest basically, and you go to one of them. And these aren't loading, so whatever. What is going on with my computer? One of them, you basically you here we go. I think this is it. Oh, this is not going to be helpful at all. I'm sorry. What? So yeah, this is kind of work. You go up to the match and you see these two people there, and this isn't going to be that helpful. But the point is, they're called twins, but if you talk to them more, you get this backstory about them. You kind of have this option, like, are you BSing me because I don't want to fight two people at once? But there's this thing about something happened where there was some issue quite related to this, and it's one consciousness. It's in two bodies, and that's sort of the premise of this fight. And afterwards, they which maybe isn't even the right pronoun, not for gender, but like, is it two or one people? But you can ask me questions like, oh, we both have a girlfriend. I have a girlfriend, and they're sort of like, oh, like, well, how do you do that? Like, how do you, manage that? Well, no, it's this days I'm with this person, and this is I'm with that person, but it's the same person, it's the same me. And there's like argument between the two forms of, are you using stop arguing with yourself, which is like one of the physical embodiments saying to the other one, don't act like you're separate when you're not. And there's this interesting dialogue. It's kind of a minor thing. It's not a big thing, and it's only one situation, but it's quite. The fun parts of Cyberpunk, the game, are like there's this interesting philosophical tangents usually in some of the side quests that come up about this. And this is actually a really interesting point where it sort of where it's like you kind of get a little bit of interaction with this sort of situation. So it's funny that it comes up here, but I guess in this case, it was allegedly a situation like you just said, where there was a clone or a duplicate created, but the original still existed. And what do you do with that? And so on and so forth. So I don't know. I have a long-standing interest in that area as well, in the sense of, can you ever really have someone else, look at your unconscious state? Like the question behind the We Robot poster from last year was like towards sharing cognitive environments, and it's like, can you do that? I think some of the deeper questions in the Norbert sense are basically, can you transmit relevant information? Like physically, there are certain limitations, but like if there is a perfect kind of like can you upload your brain to computer stuff, which I'm agnostic about currently. But like if I could upload my mind into a shared virtual space and we had the right virtual environment, headset, whatever, and someone could at least see what I'm seeing. Another concept, perhaps of note actually, in the cyberpunk universe is the concept of a brain dance, which is like a really high definition recording of someone's personal experience. And in cyberpunk, you can actually, I wonder if I can show this easily. What's a good version of this? Basically, the default recording is like a first-person view. Yeah, this is actually quite interesting, I think, about phenomenology. The default recording is basically a first-person view, like where, like if you can see here, right now you're just looking at this guy. It's like you're looking at this person's face, you're looking around here and so on. But because it's a recording, you can actually get to something like this where, oh my God, like, everything's going really slow right now. You can see like, there's like brain dance lounges where people just experience different things in these like booths. It's a similar concept to like in Fallout, one of the Fallout games, and other sci-fi stuff has this too. You can kind of see here, like, I don't know if I can show this easily. Yeah, like this is kind of it's a little crazy. You can see how there's these different. Is this gonna? Sorry, I'm gonna try it like this. It'll be a little bit easier this way. Yeah. You can see how in this, sci-fi arena, if it ever shows up. Sorry, this is maybe a bit of a stretch. But basically, you can replay the first-person experience, but you can also go back and stop it. But you can also do this disembodied thing, where in the brain dance recording, you can zoom out. You can edit the brain dance. You can get to like almost like a debugging or come on. you can get to a different I don't know why this isn't loading for me at all. So sorry. I don't know if you can see this real, but if you see on top, there's like different lines. There's like an audio track, a visual track, and like a thermal track. And you can actually zoom out from first person view and go to a third person view and look at different parts of the recorded space. It's like the whole space, the whole space is recorded. And it kind of gets at what I was talking about tracking across domains. It's like you're getting all this information because of how it was recorded. You can track like the whole immediate space around the person or the person's conscious experience. And so in the Braindance editor mode, which, okay, you can kind of see here, yeah. In the Braindance editor mode, you have access to switching between these different tracks of it. And how it kind of works is like, this is like your demo version where you're seeing this like, it's a recording of somebody going into robbing your 7-Eleven or your grocery, your bodega or whatever. And you go through it the first time, but then like they're teaching you how to like manipulate this stuff and go out and zoom from it, and then you can look at these different, I don't know, different parts of the recording. You kind of get what I'm saying, but it's interesting because I think the real magic of that was like, how would you record all of that at once, and could you do it both like proximically, but also being able to sort of the magic is of course like how would you go record both the internal physical stuff you're seeing, which maybe is easier if you have a major theme in cyberpunk in this universe is everybody has these augmentations and they cyberware in them already. Like it's very common to have cybernetics in the sci-fi term of like prosthetic eyes or enhanced eyes that aren't flesh. They're these organoids or organs that are constructed. They're machines. Maybe you have enhanced legs or whatever. And so because of that, you have these organs that work, but also these organs that could record information. I think that really gets to some of what's what like Norbert's kind of alluding to. Like, what if, in theory, could you just swap out? I mean, I guess it's an example of that you've recorded this information and now you put it in a format which happens to be a headset, as like a advanced VR headset there, where you can now just replay it back and experience it. And so I don't know, it's a big tangent of something that I'm familiar with, but interesting examples to play around with. And I'm kind of glad that I picked this game just to look at, because now I have these popular reference points for these, like, yeah, well, this is relevant to phenomenological studies because now we're going first person and third person, just like clicking a button, stuff like that. So anyway, we can move on to chapter 6 now. Law. I don't know if any other comments about that, but this was an interesting chapter. I want to run it by Valeria, my lawyer friend who has done stuff before, because it was very like, I think he's trying to draw a parallel kind of to what I said, like, well, what we want to do in an ideal world is make laws also transferable, because he was saying this bit about we want to make the judges interchangeable, right? We want to make it almost not subject to subjectivity. We want it to be a law, like almost like a physical law of it applies everywhere equally. And that's justice and so on. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about this one so far?
I didn't start it.
Okay, that's fine. I'm very okay with like not I can, ramble on about the philosophy behind cyberpunk, or we can talk about other things, or just let it be for now. I know it's summertime, so I'm not going to push too much here. Any other thoughts before we go, I guess? I guess one other thing like that's really fun about the cyberpunk stuff is it really embodies better than any other game that I've played. Like when you're in cyberpunk, like I don't know if this is a good example. Like when you're in it, it really is the best immersive experience of a total environment or a city. That's like, because you can't really do third person. You can't zoom out like in Fallout or other games. You are in this thing. So you walk around, you see the streets, you see the corners. It's very immersive that way. And I think it's quite interesting. So, I guess it had a difficult release when it came out. A lot of bugs, and I'm playing a later version. There's gonna be updates. I'm less concerned about the actual that part of it, but I feel like it's a really fun playground for a lot of these things. And I won't spoil some of what happens in the game, but the actual major part of cyberpunk is the inverse of a brain dance, and I might just leave it at that. But basically, I don't know if people care about spoilers or not, and they often do. Because the big thing about the game, like this, I don't know if you can see him here. This fellow who looks strangely like the cyberpunk version of Keanu Reeves, because something happens wherein a really radical there was supposed to be a way where you basically do what we talked about, where you copy someone's essence into a computer, you upload them somewhere. But the original versions at the time, or the version at the time was, if you do it, what's this here?
Oh, sorry, that was me. I was just sharing a link to the SEP article on personal identity. The bit on fission explains one of the thought experiments that involves like splitting a brain. So the short version would be like, oh, imagine a case where there's brain damage, but the person can survive with half their brain. So you remove the damaged part, and that person is still alive. You'd say that that's still the same person. That actually happens in reality. People have parts of their brain damaged and removed. Now imagine that. So you can imagine that with the left hemisphere. Imagine that with the right hemisphere. There's no significant difference in this thought experiment. So then imagine just cutting the hemispheres in half and putting one half in a new brain. It should follow, if you think that someone can survive the brain damage, that now you have that one person successfully split into two people. So that's like one of the thought experiments is, do you think that person actually survives? Are there two of them? Is this a case of splitting, like a later in life twinning, if you will?
Well, yeah, and kind of, I guess the cyberpunk is kind of a play on that in different ways, in the sense of the Keanu Reeves character is called Johnny Silverhands, is someone who basically attacked a megacorp, and as part of like his punishment, he was like subject to this sort of, well, we're gonna take your essence and just put you in this upload, this theoretical space, as he was an experimental form of it. It turns out we don't know what it is, but the main character eventually gets this thing put into his own, like uploaded into his brain, into his body, and it turns out it's basically the ghost of like why Johnny is in this picture is because there's a version of Johnny's information that's been uploaded into the character's head, and I haven't finished the game, but there's contention over which entity is controlling the body, basically, or can they work in collaboration and stuff like that. So it's an interesting foray into all of these things. I'm not saying we should all play this game or whatever, but it's just funny because it's such a nice kind of reference point for these much harder questions. And like I see so many. I guess in a weird way, I'm coming back to Norbert's point that I think it's weird to consider. I don't want to say, oh yeah, it's totally just a technical issue, because I don't think it is. But I feel like, I don't know, I just appreciate that 100 years later or so, there's now a video game called Cyberpunk, which is based off of cybernetics, both the theory and then what people call cybernetics, that is still touching upon the same thing in kind of a interesting way. So I don't know. I can continue to say more about that, but that's probably interesting and unexpected discussions from today. And that's I'll put this here too.
We're doing the fantasy, the imagining that Weiner started with.
I guess they're calling it a digital recording of a person's experience. The viewer can stream brain dance directly into his neural system via a special brain augmentation called a BD player. Brain dances allow the viewer to experience all brain processes registered, including emotions, muscle movements, and all stimuli perceived by the recording person. So that's some pretty high definition recording there. The brain dances are made by Megacorps. They have very simple, attractive themes, but there's also darker, controversial sides like that are, you can do very devious things. So it's sort of a commentary on all that stuff. Can be achieved from the comfort of an armchair for a reasonable price, which makes BDs the most popular form of mass entertainment in 2077. So, maybe some things to think about, maybe not. Yeah. Anything else before we go? It's probably a fun ending point for now.
So we'll skip the next meeting, and then so it'll be like 4 weeks from now, like a month.
Okay, if you want to like bump it up one or something, we can, but we'll sort that out. We'll be in touch over the next few weeks and go from there, but definitely no for the next 2 weeks. So
I won't be back until like the 14th. I'm going on a trip and then I'm moving like back to back. So it's I'm pretty busy. So I think the 17th is the next Thursday I can meet.
Well, it's good talking this time, and I hope you have a good, various adventures while you're away.
Yeah.
Well, I'll see everybody else. I'll see you, Bradley, next week.
Yeah. Well, tomorrow, I guess, or Saturday.
Right. Every day.
Yeah.
I do want to say, I'll talk about that then. But for now, good stuff. See you all next time.
Yeah. Good luck, Amanda, with your trip and everything when you're moving.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. I should see you Saturday, though.
Live streaming has stopped.
That sounds good. All right.
Okay. We'll see you all then.
And see you later. Thanks.
Talk to you soon.